I would now like to introduce Lila Ibrahim, the president of Coursera. She's also the co-founder of Team for Tech. And this NGO is a nonprofit that partners with other NGOs and tech companies and employees to deliver kindergarten through 12 education technology in developing countries. Team for Tech was born from Miss Ibrahim's experience in building a computer program at the orphanage where her father was raised in Lebanon. So a very personal and inspiring story there. Miss Ibrahim also spent 18 years at Intel, first as a microprocessor designer. I mean, how cool is that, right? Later, she was also responsible for running the education platform team that focused, again, on kindergarten through 12 education platforms. She's lived all over the world. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Ms. Lila Ibrahim, the president of Coursera.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm very honored and excited, actually, because as you just heard, I've been passionate about education for a while. In fact, I wouldn't be on this stage if my father and my mother hadn't been given educational opportunities in their careers, or in their childhood, which actually brought them also to the United States. So I'm a first-generation Arab American, and education got me to where I am today. And it got me to Coursera, and it's the reason that I'm so excited about being able to share more information about Coursera with you. So we'll cover a little bit about what inspired us to start the company, what we're doing, and then a little look to the future on some of the new programs that we're announcing. I started working with Coursera back in December of 2011, but it was from a different position. It wasn't as president of the company. It was actually as an investor in the venture capital firm. And we had gotten a call from Stanford that said, oh, there's this really amazing thing happening on campus. You should go learn about it. And right as soon as we were discussing Coursera inside, something happened, which is, next slide. Riots in Johannesburg. The University of Johannesburg had 85,000 applicants for 11,000 positions. And they happened to have some extra slots open. So in January of 2012, about 8,000 people showed up for those limited spots. There was a stampede. A mother of a prospective undergraduate student was killed. And it really brought to light the need for education. In a country where over 40% of the youth are unemployed, they look to education as a way to better their lives, not only for themselves, but for their families and their social economic status. And it's not just availability, it's also affordability. So this charts out from 1985, about the point that I was starting to think about college and my career ahead, to right now, a couple years ago, where I was actually now thinking about college and education for my children. Cost of living's gone up, but nothing beats that 560% increase for the cost of education. Perhaps it's Tom Friedman who says it best. Big breakthroughs happen when what is suddenly possible meets what is desperately necessary. So we've talked a little bit about desperately necessary, but let's now talk about what is now possible with technology. 400 people. 400 students. This is how many students are in Andrew Ng's machine learning class at Stanford University. He's one of the co-founders of Coursera, and the machine learning class is one of the most popular classes on campus. So 400 students. In the fall of 2011, they put it online, and they made it open and available and free. What happened? 100,000 students took the class. So, pretty impressive number. But do you know how many years it would take, quick math, for Andrew to teach this? 250 years. There's no way in his lifetime he could have reached as many students as he did in one class in one semester. And that's really what brought to light Coursera and the need for a massive open online course, otherwise known as a MOOC, which, by the way, happened to enter the dictionary this year. So Coursera. Coursera, as I said, Andrew's class formed the base of it. And it's basically what would we started to think about what would happen if you could provide not just machine learning, but other course material online. And not just do it in videos, but start to think about discussion formats and assessments and bringing people together. What could happen? And that is how our mission was born. Our goal is to connect people to a great education. And we want to do that to make it available to anyone around the world and to reduce the barriers and the limits to making that happen. We can't do it alone, though. We partner with universities. Content is a key ingredient. Last week, we announced over 100 institution partners. It's primarily universities that you see listed here, but it also includes new partners like National Geographic and also the World Bank. All of these partners, content providers, are looking into new ways to experiment ways of teaching. And we think it's actually great that the education community is coming together to do this. And it's not just in the United States. If you look around the world and the partners that we're working with, university partners, they're top ranked, usually the first or second ranking in each of the countries. So this is an infographic we posted last week. So since Andrew's class, where we taught about, there were 2 pilots, 111,000 students. We're now at 5.2 million students. Where are they from? They are from Brazil, Russia, India, China, Mexico, Nigeria, Indonesia. Those are the top developing economy countries that are represented. We have, as I said, we broke 100 university partners. We have over 19 million enrollments from those 5 million students. So over 48 million hours of classes that have been viewed. And so talking about the demographics, about 40% of our students are actually from developing economies, and 80% have undergrad degrees. I'm curious, has anyone here taken a Coursera class? Oh, okay, maybe you guys should be. I figure that's pretty good representation. Our course content extends not just technology, not just machine learning, but also humanities and science, engineering and business. For someone like me, we kind of think of, I graduated over 20 years ago, so my engineering degree is no longer valid. So the half-life of knowledge is decreasing. And so we feel like this is a way not only to stay up to speed in the information that you're expert at, but also a chance to explore new areas. So for me, for example, I've always wanted to be an archaeologist, so I can now go take an archaeology class online. I can take architecture. I can take a business and a marketing class. So we believe that that broad range of content is really important for our students if we want to connect people to a great education. And it's not just for higher education content. We also, we took a step back and we said, what could we do for K-12? Our content on our platform is a little bit difficult for the younger years, maybe for the older high school students. We started to look around and we noticed that a lot of the education schools are actually already on our platform, whether it's Johns Hopkins or University of Virginia, or other institutions like the Exploratorium or MoMA in New York City. So what we decided to do was look and see if there was a way that we could serve K-12 in a meaningful way. And we did that with teacher professional development training. And so teachers can come online and take classes, about 35 classes. We launched this just in May, and we've had about 165,000 users. And we thought it would primarily be US teachers, but what we found is up to 75% of the students are from international audiences. So teachers overseas who want to learn more about continuing to become experts in their profession. So we talked a little bit about teacher professional development and the content, but I also want to talk about the video formats and the formats. As I said, we're experimenting on what are effective ways to teach massive MOOCs. And one of the things we've looked at is we can get rid of the traditional 1-hour lecture. I don't know how many times I sat through lectures where I maybe just grasped a portion of it. Instead, we've looked at how do we chunk the content into smaller formats so that it's more digestible and it gives people a chance to maybe review it a couple times, or to have assessments built in that I can practice and have mastery. Do it at my own pace. Have subtitles that I can maybe go faster so that if I'm not a native English speaker, for example, I can not only watch the video, but I can also read the text in English or in other languages. Professors are experimenting here too. You can see some pictures where they're actually going on site and trying maybe interview style, or sometimes they're putting their picture down at the bottom, even when they're showing information from a screen. And the reason for that is they want to see if by having the professor watch you, if it's helping to retain students' engagement and attention to what they're learning. And through this, we've been able to identify some best practices. So we have 100,000 students or so at a time taking a class, 5 million students. What are some of the things that we've learned out of this? Well, one is peer grading. So an interesting story here is that we're started by our two co-founders, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ning, are machine learning professors at Stanford. And so they came up with all sorts of really creative ways to do grading. Multiple choice, computer program, math programs, simple answers. So they first went to Penn and they said, well, we'd really like for your poetry class, how about a multiple choice test? And that didn't go over so well. So then it was like, well, peer grading works in K-12, and it tends to be pretty effective. Studies have shown that if I'm grading your paper or you're grading mine, that there's some strong correlation with how a professor might grade it if you give some guidelines. So putting the best minds to work, we came up with an algorithm where each student has to grade 5 other students' work. And by doing that rubric, we've been able to get a pretty accurate way of grading. And we tested this initially with a course from Princeton on sociology. And TAs painstakingly hand-graded thousands of assignments, and they actually saw a correlation between the peer grading and the professor grading. So we thought that we could actually scale this and find new ways that we can coach also professors as they're developing classes that have peer grading, that we can give them best practices. We think this is scalable, and the good news is whether you're taking a Berkeley School of Music class or a poetry class, you're no longer forced into multiple choice, but rather just your peers. And we've actually, another way that we've kind of pushed the bounds is as we're thinking about how do you do some design classes. There's this interesting class that's on artifacts, the design of artifacts class, where students are actually asked to create physical artifacts for evaluation. And it's another peer-based class. But it's an interesting way that how do you teach certain classes online, like a songwriting class offered by the Berkeley School of Music. Suddenly you have this way of connecting people around the world, whether here in India, and it's this tabletop, a laptop table, a telephone holder from Spain to plug in, or space-limited table that folds down off of your wall. That's also a beautiful piece of art. And these are people coming together from around the world in the same content, applying what they've learned in the online class to physical design, and then having a chance to grade or to assess from their peers. Another best practice we've seen are forums. These are not just simple online forums. These are now community builders. Now, when I had a class, I had to wait for TA hours to open up, so a couple days a week and just limited time windows. The average response time from a post to a response is 22 minutes. That means at any point in time, someone in your class somewhere in the world is working on something similar as you are. And so we have a way of bringing people together through topics. We've also started forming community TAs. This is identifying active students. There's no incentive other than the title of community TA, where they're active on the forums and help to moderate and curate the discussions. We've seen some of these discussions actually result in meetup groups as well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But what we also found were students wanting to have, not just take the class, but they wanted to tell people, and they wanted to tell people they had taken the class, and they wanted to say that they've qualified, they've learned something, they've mastered something in the course. So we look at certificates in 3 different ways right now. There's a statement of accomplishment, which means you've successfully completed the course. There's a signature track, which results in a verified certificate. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then there's ACE accreditation, where you can take certain classes and be able to get credit that can be applied for as transfer credit. The statement of accomplishment, I mean, so you can take a class for free, and then you can upgrade to a verified certificate. So it really depends on what the student wants out of the experience. One of the interesting things from this is we had a student, Ashkat, in Kazakhstan. And he decided that he was going to take all the advanced computer science classes and attach it to his college resumes. Instead of college, he's now at Twitter. So he landed a good outcome because of it. But it's just a really nice way to see that how people are actually using this. I know when I was in the corporate environment, it was really important every year as our annual performance reviews to talk about the professional development we had. So simply taking a class is fine, but wanted proof that I've actually done something. So we're hoping through these different types of methods that we can serve customers and students in the different ways that they need. I mentioned signature track, and I just wanted to dive into this a little bit more. How this works is that you opt into a class. You can take it for free, or you can pay about $30 to $80. We have 120 classes from about 40 schools that are presenting, that present classes on this. And what happens at the beginning of it is, you get a picture taken and a certain keystroke, and we test that at the end so that we've been able to verify that it's actually you. And the chart on the right shows the difference in a survey that we took of the non-signature track in the red, and in the green and blue, our signature track. Green is financial aid, and blue is paying. And students say they're highly committed. They're highly committed, and if they pay, the completion rate's about 88%. If they don't pay, it's about 65%. For the verified certificate. And what we found that just in general with signature track, people are more likely to complete a class. So the average student might be around 10% for completion, and it goes up to 60%. So we're finding that highly motivated students that are really committed to the content, that want proof that they've actually taken a class and learned something, have a higher completion rate. So as we're doing this, as we're building out this MOOC, we're trying to understand how students best learn, what motivates, what inspires them, what their needs are, so that we can build this into the platform and deliver a better education for folks. In the signature track this fall, Wharton launched several of their first-year MBA classes. So for example, Introduction to Marketing, Operations, Finance. These are like MBA fundamentals that previously weren't available to people. I never went back, and I always wanted to get my MBA, but after a career in tech, it was hard to leave, and it would have been even harder to go from California here to the East Coast. So having a chance to do this remotely at any point in your career, I think is really exciting. And so we're thrilled to have Penn involved with us on that. I mentioned cost in the last slide, but we do offer financial aid. As I said, part of our goal is making education accessible, and in order to do that, we have to remove the barriers, whatever they may be, including financial. So we've offered about 2,000 fee waivers to date. Students fill out an application, and we're really just trying to, again, remove barriers for people to continue with what their passions are. We get stories every day. This is one from Akash. He was a financial aid recipient. Whoops. He comes from a middle-class family from a small town in India, never had the luck and guidance to reach Stanford for education. Guess what? God has sent the opportunity right across my doorstep. Heartfelt thanks to the team and teachers who made this happen. Or another one, from Jolene, who's in the United States. Coursera changed my life. If I would have never taken the sociology course, I would have never met some amazing people, including one who helped me step out of my daily life. If it wasn't for Coursera, she and I would have never co-founded an NGO together. Now both of us take Coursera courses to help us our work in our NGO. These are just some of the stories. Every week in our team meetings, we actually read stories from students, whether it's an autistic young man or a suicidal woman who found that education got her engaged and being able to communicate with people from around the globe brought her into a different mindset. Whether it's a small business owner in South America who's trying to keep up. I think what we're seeing and what we're feeling and what we're discovering is what we knew. Education changes lives, and that's why we're all here today, and that's what we're trying to do with Coursera. As I said, some of these communications online transcend into physical meetups. So this is all organic. About 3,000 meetups to date, where people that are taking the class will meet in local communities. And this got us thinking. This is happening organically, but what could we do to help facilitate that? How could we help bring local communities together? But there were three barriers. The technology infrastructure, how do you make the content available? How do you make sure that there's a physical location for them to meet? How do you help them discover content that's locally relevant? And then, how do you do it in a way where you have a facilitator or someone that can make sure the experience of coming together is really meaningful and impactful? And this is really what prompted us to think about learning hubs for those of you who may have heard yesterday's news. Learning hubs are a way for us to empower individuals to achieve more through blended learning and local community centers. So what does blended learning mean? Blended learning, I think in this audience probably everyone may know, but what we mean by it is taking the class online, then coming together, whether it's for a discussion or tutoring or for project-based. And learning hubs bring together actual physical locations. We have a facilitator and a peer group. And for us, it's a way to further our mission of connecting everyone to education. What we're also hoping to do out of this is to get students even more engaged and track outcomes and completion rates and learn on what makes an outstanding blended learning experience and how we can reach people in communities that may not have access otherwise. We did there are three case studies I just want to hit real quick before I talk more about where we're moving with learning hubs. There were 10 women in Ohio, and low income, mostly unemployed, average age of 50. This is the group right here. They came together with a facilitator who was a retired teacher. And together they selected a class, and the class they selected was University of Virginia's Jarden, the business strategy class. Out of the class, by having the community together, 6 of the 10 women finished. 2 of them got new jobs. This is in Ohio, women in their 50s, unemployed. So that was our first look at what would happen if we could bring together people in a physical location with a great facilitator. The next case study, with Digital October in Moscow, with representatives from surrounding countries as well. 250 students, and the focus was really eco-sustainability. So how could they improve the environment? There were lots of examples of people with different projects, corporate gamification to encourage rail versus car, other gamification to get people to carpool. The top 2 winners were selected to continue on with their project. One is an app, and the other is a government program. Third case study with the State Department. 14 countries, class sizes ranging from 15 to about 40. Some sites actually had a graduation ceremony. But probably wondering about retention then, what kind of graduation ceremony they had. Completion rates went from about 7 to 10% on an average MOOC to 40 to 70%. So they had nice graduation ceremonies, they had access to career services, students came back for reunions and they had formed relationships that they took beyond their course. So what did we learn from this? What did we learn from these 3 pilots? We learned that magic happens when you can apply the online learning around a particular topic, and you can use that to solve problems, build a project, have discussions, and when the students are able to turn that knowledge into something that's meaningful either for them as an individual, whether it's a new job or a new career path or just to better, an area they've always wanted to learn about, or that benefits their community, such as solving some of the problems in their communities. So we're thrilled to be announcing the launch of our global learning hubs. And this is based on the successful pilots that we've had. And through these learning hubs, we're hoping to extend the reach and the opportunities for students to connect to a great education. Learning hubs enable students, like I said, to go to these internet-enabled spaces, to interact with other students, and have the help of facilitators. Our launch includes 30 global learning hubs, 24 countries, 5 continents, made possible with 8 organizations. The State Department, Department of State with over 20 countries, Sudan, Kenya, to India and Bolivia, Haiti, Iraq, and more. And we're building off of the pilots together. So these partners, from our perspective, were chosen because we felt that they would be really great in helping us not only provide meaningful experiences, but also gain the learnings to make the program even better. In Kenya, Overcoming Faith Academy and Orphanage. I was just in Kenya in May, building out a computer lab with schools that were close to the grid but didn't have electricity, let alone internet access. So what we're doing in Kenya is we're trying to provide low-cost devices where you can download the content so that you don't need an internet connection. Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi in India is another one I wanted to highlight. This is a teaching college, and it's girls only. So the learning hubs are set up where the students and the students become teachers for another learning hub. So they get to practice and have this experiential learning opportunity. So we're really excited to be having these partners and really looking forward to where we can take this. I wanted, actually, let me go back. I wanted to read a quote from one of the Learning Hub pilots. We have just completed our 4th sitting at the Learning Hub for social psychology course. It's a densely packed course with long 70-page readings per week, in addition to the video lectures and 30 to 40-minute documentary videos. I got tired reading that sentence. The workload is high, and sometimes it's hard to keep up when you're doing it yourself. In an ordinary setting, many of our students would likely have dropped out, but our weekly discussions have helped people stay in the course. The hub is our own mini discussion forum. Quote, fantastic, isn't it? And that's what we're hoping to do, not make learning burdensome, but rather make it an opportunity to have a meaningful experience that you can better your life. So what have we learned from the pilots? Popular courses, entrepreneurship, teacher professional development, and economics. Connectivity, we need to continue to figure out how to handle offline and how to make content more available on all sorts of mobile devices. Maximize utility. A lot of these centers that we did in our pilots are actual classrooms or community centers or other locations that we did with the State Department where American Space is overseas, where we're able to repurpose existing space in the evenings or in off hours. And so we've gotten efficiency and community engagement and connection to those locations. And the other part is our local facilitators are already important parts of their fabric in their communities. So this is giving, and they all want a chance to give back. So for example, the Fulbright scholars, and a chance to come back and actually teach a class and give something to their local communities. So we're pretty excited about this network that we'll be able to build out together. Final slide, and then I'll take questions. I said at Coursera, we believe that education is a basic human right, and our goal is connect people with an education. We do this with partnerships, whether it's universities, organizations, governments, teachers, and students. That's why we're all here today. Our goal we envision is a future where everyone has access, where everyone has access not just to education, but to a quality education. And that in the past has been limited to a few based on your geographic location, the family you were born in, all sorts of other barriers, financial barriers. But we're hoping that we're going to be able to empower people. And I think I'm really looking forward to the rest of the discussions today, because we're really trying to understand how we can work together to expand the global opportunities for people worldwide. Thank you. Q&A or?
So there'll be 2 microphones that'll sort of rove around looking for questions. So just raise your hand if you have a question, and then Lila will take your questions. There's a question here.
Hi, Lila. Thank you. Reza Jafari, Chairman and CEO of eDevelopment International. Much like you, although you were in Purdue and I was in IU, the 2 rivals but friends, I guess at the end of the day, doing my doctorate in instructional systems technology. One thing that I'm trying to learn more and more about Coursera, congratulations, by the way, great success. What is your business model? And I've been trying to make my own contribution as a social entrepreneur, do good, make good, and feel good, so to speak. If you can share with us what the business model is and how you can move this forward for sustainable organization.
I think we're experimenting right now with various business models. As I mentioned, the signature track is one way where we're able to, it's really important for us to be able to provide the content for free to anyone who wants it. So we feel like we're holding ourselves accountable to a double bottom line, right? The social mission and the business mission. We selected to go the route of a business because as a for-profit organization, you can hire the best, retain, grow, which means you can serve more students. Speaking from the investor side, when I was on the venture capital side, there is a trend in the consumer internet technology companies right now where the focus is more of, do you have a product that matches a consumer need? So the product market fit. There's another topic that we talk about a lot, like how do you make sure that you have sustained growth and engagement and retention? So the focus primarily has been on getting the product market fit right, engaging students and trying to understand, making sure that people are actually staying in the class and on the platform, so retention is really important to us. So those are some of the best practices that we're seeing in the tech startups in Silicon Valley. For Coursera specifically, as I mentioned, the signature tracks are one way that we're looking at monetizing. We're also exploring other opportunities. For example, our certain services, tutoring, or again, how do you improve the experience? So whether it's tutoring, are there other features that we can add into the platform that people might want to upgrade to? Are there memberships that might make sense, or certain courses that go together? So again, it's all about how do we find that right product market fit, but do it in a way that stays true to our mission.
Another question.
Hi, it's wonderful to hear you speak. My name is Pamela Lowenstein, and I work at World Learning. And I've been, over the past couple of years, having my students and my alumni that are actually Department of State alumni participate in like a MOOC that we offer through my office, and your stats are really impressive when they're talking about like the signature courses, but I'm just wondering if you have the stats on your other courses, there's just the free courses, the ones that aren't coming with the certificate, and how many people actually graduate, because it's something that I really struggle with, that I get so many people actually there the first day or maybe the first week or maybe the first 3 weeks, and then the drop-off is just really drastic. And so I'm just wondering if what you've said is actually the completion rate.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a complicated answer, so bear with me here, and I'll take you through the response on how do we think about completion. With such a broad range of course offerings, we actually want people to explore content. So like I mentioned earlier, I have an interest in archaeology, but I don't know if I really do. It just sounds interesting from afar. So I want to be able to take a class and experiment and say, oh, you know what? It's not archaeology. I'm more interested in taking songwriting. So we want people to be able to experiment without feeling guilty. And so that's actually a really important thing for us. So we're trying to find the right balance of how do we, that's that graph that showed the highly committed versus people that are just exploring. So we're really trying to understand the student motives when they start the class. And I think that's an important part of looking at numbers overall. What we found is if a student gets past the first big assignment, then it's a 40% completion, over a 40% completion. That's on average across all the content. And so the trick is how do you break down your analytics, and how do you get the folks who are really interested in this past that first assignment? And we haven't done anything on the Coursera platform yet to do things like to remind students. So we think there's some gamification and some social aspect that we can really increase retention rates. And part of what we're doing with the Learning Hub is really trying to see how does the blended learning experience and having people meet face-to-face and kind of the social pressure of, oh gosh, the team's counting on me, I better make sure I'm up to speed on my homework, or that I've watched the video and I'm ready to participate in the discussion, or I didn't do it last week, so I better, so we're trying to see if that social pressure makes a difference in completion. Early indications are that it absolutely does, and we'll be able to see now that we're scaling it more globally.
Hi. Content provision seems to be a key aspect, obviously, with this model. In a brick and mortar situation, most students are going to be expected to purchase textbooks and course materials. How is Coursera managing the challenge of fair use and access to e-content?
I can handle this at a high level, and this is where I'll use my I've been at Coursera for 2 months card. It was something very important. We wouldn't have signed up all these universities if we hadn't had worked through a lot of these details. We did have the request for textbooks come up quite a bit, and so we added an option that if a professor really wants to have a textbook available, that the student could purchase a textbook, and we've actually had a very low conversion on that. And so, but at the end of the day, the universities own the content that's hosted on our platform. We work with them to deal with copyright issues, to deal with accessibility of the issues related to the content. Sorry, I don't have more details beyond that.
Hi, my name is Jessica Deer, and I actually run an NGO in Lebanon called Social Media Exchange, and we have been doing online learning around digital advocacy and participation for the past 4 or 5 years, as well as on-site training, and have always blended the two. So right now we're building an online course in digital advocacy, and being very new at this and sort of naive, or realizing how long it takes to produce the content. So I'm wondering, sort of what it costs to produce a course for Coursera, how much lead time there is, and then I'm also curious about smaller organizations like us. How do we, since we're already established in our community, how do we become a part of a learning hub, or maybe we could facilitate certain kinds of courses?
So the first question was about developing the content. It really varies depending on institution. The universities actually create their own content, and they want ownership of that. In fact, the universities are quite protective of even dealing with the faculty. So we have partnership managers who work with them, but it's still a very, so it varies depending on institution. It's not, right now, it's not an easy process. It should be easier because it's not just chunking the content, it's also saying, how do we do assessments and integrate assessments? How do you how do you implement some best practices? And so I would expect over the next year plus, we're going to make leaps, and we've barely scratched the surface. This is still so early. We're in our infancy and developing MOOCs. And so one of the things that I've actually, since I've joined, I've been really pushing on is how do we start doing more best practices and share the key learning. So not only the institutions can benefit from each other's experience, but also other organizations that have this kind of aspire to do similar work. How do we have people participate in learning hubs? A lot of this comes with, right now we're trying to be very deliberate in how we move forward. I'm really excited. You know, the past 10 to 20 years of my life, I've worked on putting technology infrastructure in place. We no longer have to justify the technology part. Now it's all about how do I get relevant content. And so I'm really excited about this transition, but we want to do it in a way that's deliberate where we can understand how do we scale this. So right now, my recommendation would be to talk to one of our partner institutions, and today's a great opportunity with the Department of State. And then as we go through this first phase, we're likely going to then publish how to get more involved. The one thing I will say that you kind of sparked for me, I wanted to mention, when I built that computer lab at the orphanage in 2000, I had to fight because they didn't want the education. They wanted electricity, they wanted food and clothing, and other things. But my dad told them, don't discourage the girl. They said, and he had some clout given his life there in the younger years. They said, this isn't America, you can't do this in 2 months. And he said, well, don't tell her that. And then we did it with the community really engaged in building that computer lab, and the students at the orphanage felt very proud of the fact that even though they were 17-year-olds in 7th grade because of the political situation there, at a time when they looked like they had no future, they were given an opportunity. I have the benefit of having been kind of early in this space. And a few years later, I got an email. That was a good sign. We tore down a wall in the high school. When are you coming back to build the next lab? By the way, school starts in 3 weeks. So we raised money from friends, made it happen again. And then last year, I got an invite on a Facebook. And it said, old friends reunion. I thought, what is this? I'm getting spammed by someone, because my friends wouldn't call ourselves old. And it turned out to be my students from 2000. One one young gentleman got a scholarship in France for mechanical engineering. One was a journalist in Dubai. A woman was studying chemie in Lebanon. Others had pictures of their families and friends, and these were, like I said, 17-year-olds who were in 7th grade. And so what I would encourage you all in the rest of today, as I look through that amazing agenda, is to really think about what we are doing together, like individually and together, where we can make those connections here for the rest of the day, because I really do believe there's so much opportunity, and if we can, the education market is so fragmented right now that if we can find a way to pull together resources, like there's no doubt that with some passing of time, we can make a difference. And we're still at the cusp of what technology can do.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Dawn Bukowski from Ohio University, and I direct an English language improvement program there. And we integrate technology across our curriculum throughout our courses. And one thing we run into is learner training. So I'm wondering if you address learner training with your courses, if you need to, and if so, how you do so, to best use the courses, the material, the technology that you offer.
The simple answer to that is we don't do nearly enough as we need to, and everything to date has been very organic. And one of the things we're hoping with the Learning Hub is that we expect a lot of the participants haven't necessarily used technology before. That's why we're trying to provide them technology access. As we mentioned in one of the pilots, that career services were offered to the students in tutoring. So it's very unexplored. It's an area of interest. I think we feel it's part of our social obligation to help students understand what they can do with the content, and we're trying to understand what those pathways are. So we should talk later. I think there's a question up here. And over there.
Hi, I'm Pam Chris from World Learning. I work with the youth development teams, so I'm wondering if there's any interest in Coursera going down and getting the high school population.
Yeah. When we looked at that initially, that's where our teacher professional development training came from, because you can imagine, like, at least I can imagine, a scenario where I'm in high school and I want to take AP, my AP classes, and I want to test out of, that was exactly what I had to worry about in university. How do I get out of some of my classes, or how do I take them so that when I actually take them in university, I can take them well? So I think there's opportunity at the senior grade levels, but it's really not our focus right now, and the company's 2 years old, so less than 2 years old. So we haven't thought about the lower grade levels yet, and we think things like Khan Academy, which are really disrupting K-12 in a positive way, are some of are kind of filling that gap, and we're really just trying to focus and do what we do better, and then think about how we might expand it into new geographies and into other age groups.
Thanks. Dan Ingvarson from the Australian Federal Government. I've just been at a conference in Qatar, the World Innovation Summit for Education, and it's one of the awards that was given away at the summit was for Allison, which is another sort of provider of online courses. And also recently there was a report from, I think it's Ernst & Young, that was talking about universities and their declining access to funding. And earlier on I heard you talk a little bit about how your content comes from universities. So we're seeing, if you like, a market shift in who is the provider and who is the developer of the content and who is the assessor and who is the accreditor. So my question is, how do you see that kind of thing playing out? Do you see MOOCs becoming competitors to universities?
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a hot topic of conversation in California, where we have a couple of MOOC platforms. When Coursera was first forming, there was a conscious decision to take a different approach of working with the universities. And we stayed very true to that approach. At university and other content providers, we have an advisory board with some of our founding universities that help as kind of a steering committee in the work that we do. Those relationships are pretty sacred to us. So we are looking, and we know the universities right now are experimenting with content, whether they're overcrowded, whether they're trying to extend their reach, whether their professors are really excited because they have kind of they're thought leaders in their profession and want to extend beyond their university. So there are a lot of different motivations from the university partners we work with. I think so our job as a company is to work with them to continue to make that experience on the Coursera platform better. So as they experiment, they continue to work with us and to innovate in meaningful ways to the students, because at the end of the day, we put students first. That's our #1 value at the company. So I think that together we're trying to navigate this, and it's going to get murky, and we see it getting murky in other MOOC initiatives. But given the partnership approach that we have, we're hoping that we navigate it together. One of the things we're starting to see are some of the state systems that actually want to take content from some of the partner schools that we have, where we have kind of the expert in the field teaching the class, and use that in a blended classroom experience for their own university. So when the students come into the classroom, they're having the discussions. It's enriching what the local university can provide. So we are experimenting with various universities on models that work.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for coming, and your insights and everything you've done so far is excellent. I want to go back to your pilot cases, if I may. What did you find statistically? You did say that it did have some degree of sustainability, which is why you could continue on and expand. What about the age or motivation, the family involvement? How did all that play out?
Actually, I'd like Paul from the State Department to talk about it, because he was actually really involved with the pilot that we did and has more information on some of the details.
So hi, I'm Paul Kruczewski. I'm a special assistant in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. I'm one of the people who's helped develop our MOOC work, including the 2 pilot programs that Lila has been talking about and Evan talked a little bit about earlier. I can tell you some anecdotals, particularly on motivation and on age. We didn't do a big data set on that, so all I can give you is anecdotal based on what we heard from posts in the field. On age, it varies widely, but it's typically what we'd call youth. So about 17 to about 27 was the primary age range that we heard coming back. And you know, the motivation varies widely, but there are a couple of themes that we heard throughout from people in the surveys that came back. One was learn new skills, particularly for the courses on entrepreneurship and on business development. We actually have a really great video up on our website, eca.state.gov, under MOOC Camp, that actually includes an interview with one of our students in Bolivia who's taking an entrepreneurship course right now. Another one that we hear quite a lot is students see this as an opportunity to learn more about the US education system and prepare themselves to apply to universities, particularly in the United States. And that's one that we hear a lot.
We'll take one more question. Hi, I'm from Tech Change, and we're a tech startup here based in DC. And my question to you is about how Coursera has been working with the private sector. Specifically, earlier you mentioned that Coursera is focusing a lot on meeting market needs. So in terms of addressing unemployment and some of the skills that firms need, I know you mentioned earlier how Twitter hired one of your students who took all the computer science courses, but what are some of the other major skills and backgrounds that you're hearing from corporations that is shaping the content that Coursera is providing?
Well, we're talking to a lot of companies about, and organizations as well around the globe about what type of content they need. There's a lot of, the skills that we're hearing that people would like are, mobile developers. Like there's just a general shortage of that around the globe. And I think finding a university or a content partner for that is one thing that we're thinking about. Business classes. When I led an engineering team, I really wanted my team to know more about marketing and end user experiences so they could design a better product. Similarly, I think as leadership, if you think about leadership development in companies, just finance becomes really important, or even personal finance for individuals is a critical skill. We're seeing a lot more in the kind of both the tech side and then basic business are the two areas, two categories. There's also a lot around around leadership skills that companies are asking for, like social psychology classes, and negotiation was one of our top classes that we had for a while. So that's also kind of some of the soft skills where people didn't necessarily study them, or we're seeing come up quite a bit. Right now, a lot of that has just come through more casual conversations. We don't have a concerted effort at this time, but just given, again, my corporate background, I think it's something that I'm really interested and excited about. And then I also think around unemployment. Like I wish there were some, how do you do some of the manufacturing classes as well would be, I think, something that could be, operations is an important part of that, but not the only solution. I, again, like to thank you, and I'll be around for the rest of the day if there are any other questions offline. Thank you.